Okay, let's go over here. Right here. It has to do with a man by the name of Hans Wolf. Hans Wolf was a rich Jew from Germany during the early 1900s. And I think he was mostly into real estate. I'm not 100% sure. Anyhow, he had a son who was a very, very Zionist son, very pro-Israel, believing that the Jewish people must come back to their national home, which should be in Palestine, it was called back then. And after the Nazis came to power, for sure, and he just said, Dad, there's no reason for us to stay here. I'm going. If you want to stay, you could stay. So his name was Yaakov Koch. And Hans, because he had so much property and so many stuff and riches, it was hard for him to leave Germany. So actually his son left, he immigrated, he came to Israel, he most likely went into the kibbutz movement, and then later on he joined the Palmach, the Israeli, it was some kind of a unit that the British trained, because during the war, the Great War, when the Second World War broke out, there was a fear that the Germans are going to make it all the way through the Middle East if they weren't stopped by Montgomery at North Africa. So they started training some kind of military forces that will be able to do some damage to the Germans. So this was the actual first time that there was ever any trained professional Jews that were ever since the Iron Age. So they did not need to be used, but they were a great force during the Independence War. Eventually, Hans Koch himself, he loses most of his property in the Holocaust, but he survives it. And he comes to Israel after the war to join his son, and his son would be part of the Israeli defense forces, and he would die during a war of independence down at Nitzanim. So his father was able to save some of his property, and he comes to Jerusalem and he builds a hotel. It would be known as the Holy Land Hotel in Malta. Today you're going to see a big tower there. You can see the tip of the tower actually right left of that pole. There's a tip of a tower. That is the tower that got Ehud Olmert into jail. They said there were some kind of unkosher things that were going on in that project. And anyhow, the tower was built where the hotel used to be.
Is he still in jail?
No, he's out.
Oh,
Now, Hans Koch wanted to build something for this, some kind of attraction or something, and he built this wonderful model here in the memory of his son Yaakov. He brings some of the most knowledgeable people to the history of Jerusalem during the first century. A professor by the name of Michael Aviona. יוני, סליחה, yes, sir? יש לך לייזר במקרה? כן. תן לי אותו שנייה. Michael Aviona is the guy who made this. It has a. You gotta unlock it because it's so powerful. I know. The key's right there. So Aviona is the guy who comes and builds this model, and the students of the faculty of history, and they come and they build this lovely model. And for many years, this was the only thing. This is the only thing that you could see of Jerusalem, because this model and everything that it stands for was located on the east side of Jerusalem, which was in the hands of the Jordanian Legion. So many people would come, and it was a very famous model and what have you. After 1967, once the Israelis came back to control all of Jerusalem, including East Jerusalem, after the Six-Day War, this model almost became a prophecy. Because up until 67, there was only so much archaeological digs that were being done. Maybe in the beginning it was from Charles Warren, this British officer, Kathleen Kenyon, and other archaeologists, but they only got certain permits and not too much from the Jordanian government. Nothing like today. Today, most of the digging, 90% of the digging is only after 1967 of ancient Jerusalem, and it pretty much confirmed the model, to be honest. So it's a pretty cool thing. Every now and again, some adjustments were made, like Robinson's art and stuff like that. And the sources that he uses was the oral law. A lot of the Jewish oral law describes the temple worship and how to do it the right way, and the buildings and how it was built. Historical documents like Josephus, a great volume of books describing also Jerusalem. Some archaeological digs that were published up until it was built, I think, in the early 1960s. So anything that was published up until then, he used that as well. And some imagination sometimes he would use as well. So, come and let's visit the Jerusalem of 2,000 years ago. The scale is 1 to 50, which means that 1 centimeter here is a half a meter in real life. Right now, we'd be standing here. I'm going to take you to this very spot in a few days, and it's called the Mount of Olives. And it would look similar to this, only today there's a golden dome, not a temple. But you'd be standing on the Mount of Olives. There's a valley over here separating the next mountain that we're standing in front of, which is called Mount Moriah. The valley separating us and Mount Moriah is called the Kidron Valley. Over here there would be a gate, and the sheep's gate. Today it's called the Lion's Gate. Next to it there were two pools with 5 porches. So it's good that we're here first. I love how the South Africans put the itinerary that we actually start at the model, because they'll give you a better perspective, I believe, when we actually go to the pools of Beit Hisda. See the pools of Beit Hisda? Now there's the plaster inside of those pools. A little bit of it has survived. You could actually see part of the pool. It looks nothing like this today because the Byzantines came, and based on what happened here in the book of John how Jesus would heal a crippled man. You know what Christians like to do? Build churches. So it's very hard to build a church on a pool. So they actually build it on the dam, and you have these arches going into the pool. They destroyed the pools, but they built the church. But that's okay. The church was destroyed not a long time later. So it all stands in ruins. But this would be the pools. Now they could date the plaster, and that's from the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah.
Wow.
In my opinion, the pools were used, and that's just my opinion. And I don't think in the Iron Age baptisms was a bunch of a great deal. But Zvi, I always tell people that I think the pools of Beit Hisda was used for the maintenance of the temple, because I think they have dated the plaster even to the days of Hezekiah, and I think it was used for the temple worship, for cleaning, all the blood and guts. What do you think? Zvi is the best guide in Israel, by the way.
I tend to agree with what you're saying.
You're just being polite.
I am not a polite person.
I like that.
Okay? I'm as direct as could be. So I tend to agree with you. Take it as you want it.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you muchly. So anyhow, I think that was the main reason of these pools. It would gather the rainwater from both sides over there into these pools. The dam, I'm guessing, was some kind of a filter maybe, and then you would get the other water over here. And baptisms were not yet in great effect during the first temple period, so I think it was just used to clean. You had to keep the place clean. There's a lot of blood and guts going over here during the sacrifice. Sanitary was very important. You didn't want to have these plagues come on the whole city, and that's what I believe that these pools were used for.
On this model, where would be the western wall today?
We will see it. The western wall. Well, first of all, as you can see, Herod he doesn't destroy the mountain, but he builds so much onto it that it's hard to notice that this is a mountain, but this was a hill over here called Mount Moriah. Now, Herod, this is what I believe. Again, Herod sees that 3 times a year, Jews and Gentiles from all over the world come to this temple. Now, when Herod was here, when he before his project, there was already a temple. It was Ezra and Nehemiah's temple. It was the Hasmonean temple, that if Alexander the Great came through Israel and went there, he would have gone to that temple. So it was a temple. I mean, we have document in the Bible saying that some people survived the Babylonian exile, and they saw the Solomon's temple and they saw the new temple, and when they were comparing the both, they were crying, but others were rejoicing. The younger generation, because it was their hope to reestablish the temple. But anyhow, there wasn't much to compare. It wasn't something like this. He wants to build a huge temple that could hold a lot of people. And I'm thinking, you follow that money line. I'm thinking that he probably said, if a lot of people will come, Peggy, they're going to need a hotel. They're going to need a guide, a bus driver, somewhere to eat lunch, maybe buy some souvenirs. Hey, I can make a lot of tax money off of this. And sure enough, he did. So he wants a big, huge temple on a hill. That doesn't work, brother. No. So the other thing you need to do is shave off the hill. But no, he wants his hill elevated. He wants the temple elevated. So he does it the hard way. He does 1, 2, 3, 4 retaining walls around the hill. And then he has arches going into the retaining wall. And he covers that all up with dirt. And that's what gives you this platform. The platform still exists till this day. We'll be going there, God willing. But the platform has been made by Herod. Everything else has been destroyed, ruined down to the ground. But the platform still stands till this very day.
So all the exterior here with these Corinthian columns going crazy around it, that and this exterior wall here was all his addition?
Yeah, he built everything here. I mean, This is actually, Peggy, to be honest, this is the third temple. There's nothing left. As Herod had this tendency of destroying anything that was before him. He was trying to make a point too. Nothing is important until now. Only Herod from now on, the great murderer. So, yeah, this was all Herod. This is actually the third temple. You had the first one with Solomon, Ezra, and Nehemiah. The second one. This would have been the third one. But because the second one was never destroyed in an act of war, but it was only like home improvement, renovated, it's still called the Second Temple. So we call it the Second Temple 2.5.
And so the inside was the part that was the second temple, and then Herod did all the exterior.
He eventually destroyed that as well and built everything new. He would train priesthood families as masons so they could do the work, because nobody but the priest can go around the sanctuary and the holy place, definitely not the Holy of Holies. So he would actually train priests in his work, and they were paid. It wasn't slave work here. This guy paid paycheck. That's why you got all of this glorious Jerusalem, because he was able to, first of all, he kept the peace with a sword. It was stable, and he had the opportunity of doing all of these projects. Any more questions before?
Yeah.
Yes, brother.
In this model, is Pontius Pilate's Roman Praetorium in here somewhere?
Ah, thank you very much, Larry, for being here. Do you see this huge fortress on the northwestern corner of the temple? That is it. This is the Antonius Fortress. This is the Antonius Fortress. So today, it's a Muslim school, and nothing like that has survived much. And that today is the beginning of the Via Dolorosa. So right about down there would be a place at the foothills of the Mount of Olives, right above the Valley of Kidron. There's a place called the Garden of Gethsemane. It is believed that Jesus was betrayed there, and he was taken to Caiaphas' house. And then when they found him guilty, what need be more of any witnesses? You heard him with his own ears. With our own ears we heard what he said. Then they deliver him to Pontius Pilate. And most people believe that he was here at this fortress, this Roman fortress. And so this is where they consider is the pavement where Jesus was judged. And from here starts a street called the Via Dolorosa, the way of
is
suffering.
it accurate, when we were in Caesarea yesterday, at the time, that was the capital that Rome set up, and there was a praetorium there, but they also built this praetorium because it was a center of the Jewish worship that they had to control. Is that?
Yes.
So this was the praetorium Pontius Pilate was at that they took Jesus to. They didn't take him back to the praetorium in Caesarea.
Again, it's the same issue with today. You got the finance capital is Tel Aviv. So back then, the finance capital, the fun city next to the beach would be Caesarea with all the games and everything that goes on with the entertainment. Jerusalem is the holy city. Jerusalem is the politicians and priests and what have you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yoni, can you show us the western wall?
Yeah, we have to go. Now we're looking towards the west, but we're seeing the eastern wall. We'll have to go all around to see the western wall. So,
Gate right here,
yeah,
right,
this
Yoni?
is the eastern gate.
Where you do a return.
This is the eastern gate, the eastern gate, the golden
Yeah, right up here.
We're making our way down. We're still following the Kidron Valley, and we're walking south. We're walking down south. We see here the southern eastern corner. By the way, guys, this part here is some of the oldest parts of the Temple Mount. Right around this southern eastern corner, there's some stones there. There's some parts of the building there that goes back to the Hasmonean period. I heard that people say. Tradition says that James was thrown over here by King Herod, if I'm not mistaken, Herod Agrippa. What we're looking at here is the main entrance to the Temple Mount. The main entrance to the Temple Mount was the southern steps, a big set of steps that led up into the temple. Herod builds an underground passage where you go through these two arches on the closer side over here, and you go and it leads you up into the platform. It's an underground passage that leads you up to the platform, and then you would exit from the other two. So this is that. That's the royal portico up above. Inside you would have the worship being done and what have you. So this, what we're seeing now already, is called the City of David. This is where Jerusalem began, at the City of David. Now we're looking at the City of David. Again, the time frame over here is the days of Jesus. It's the 1st century. So back then, what you had here were some rulers from Mesopotamia. A queen by the name of Helena, her children Monbaz, they converted to Judaism, and they came and they built their palaces here. So this is how it looked in the days of Jesus. It looked nothing like this in the days of David. When we visit there, we're going to be concentrating on the Iron Age. This is already the Roman period now. As we come down to the bottom of the bottom of the City of David, you already start to see the Kidron Valley over here. Now there's another valley coming up here, that is the Hinnom Valley. And then in the middle, there's a small valley. You can't really notice it, but you can see those bridges going over it, and you see that big, huge bridge over there. And there's another valley separating the Western Hill, it was called, the Western Hill, from the City of David. The City of David is actually on the slopes of Mount Moriah, and then you have the Western Hill over there. So what I want to show you here is this pool. There was a pool here called the Siloam Pool. So it was made operational by
big.
King Hezekiah by diverting the water into the city. But this pool was already being used in the days of Jesus, and this pool was already, back then it was already being used for baptized as well. People would baptize as they went up to the Temple Mount. All around the southern steps we find a whole bunch of ritual baths, a lot of ritual baths. All over the Jewish quarter there's ritual baths. Look at the upper city. The upper city is these big mansions, most likely the Sadducees and the priesthood families that were making money. All of those houses we find with private ritual baths in there. So baptism by then was big. You want to get baptized before you go up to the temple. There's so many ritual baths in the southern steps that some believe that the day of Pentecost actually took place over there, because it would be nothing for 3,000 people to go into the water over there. But I think the scriptures say that they were in the upper room. So, the layout of the city. I think there's so many scriptures, but I just don't remember them now. I have to mark them when I'm in my room later. God willing, I will do that. That mention that God, even from the days of Moses, he commands them concerning the feast. You're going to go up 3 times a year to the place that my name would dwell there, or something like that. Something concerning the place and the name of God. Some people say that the topographics of Jerusalem might actually have something to do with that. Because if you look at this valley over here, the valley of Hinnom, and then there's this valley over here, the valley of Kidron, and then you see this little valley in here separating the West Hill from Mount Moriah. It was mentioned, we only have Josephus' name for this valley, the Theropean Valley. Today you can't even notice it's a valley at all because so much has been built over it. But don't worry, when I take you from the Jewish quarter to the wall, you'll notice that you go down and up. But there is a valley here, the Theropean Valley, which kind of makes the shape of Spock. Remember this? Live long
See
and
those
prosper, exactly.
buildings
So
there, he said
what
those are-
you all know about Spock is that his real name was Leonid, and that he was actually a Cohen. He was a priesthood family. And why this? Again, because this is what the priesthood families, they would make this shape with their hands during the priesthood blessings, and they take their tzitzit and they start blessing Israel. Hashem yishmocha v'yivarcha yasem panav elecha v'yashub lecha shalom. God bless you and keep you, make His face be upon you and give you peace. So that is what he remembered from God when he became Islam as well. So this is a letter that they're doing with their hands. They're doing an alphabet letter called the Shin. And you might see it on the mezuzahs. Everywhere you go, you might see a mezuzah on your doorpost. You'll see this letter, Shin. So Shin is just the holy letter, the name of God, the God of Shaddai, the keeper of the Lord of Israel, some say. But you see how the city is built into this letter Shin. So this be the Kidron, this means the Hinnom. The city is actually built into the letter Shin. You know, when the Lord keeps repeating in many places, the place where my name would dwell, the place where my name would dwell, take the sacrifices to the place where my name would dwell. Maybe he refers to Jerusalem, but the topographics that make out the letter. That's cool. I've heard it a few times. I just thought it was cool, so that's why I repeat it. It is cool. Okay, everybody, we'll keep going this way, and we'll try to pass this up.
So where we would, where we go into Hezekiah's tunnel, is going to be like somewhere over here, and then we come out at the
Nada que ver. Nada que
so
ver.
I'm sure exactly where, but somewhere in the city of David. Yeah, right over here. See where the city of David. This is the city of David right here. On the right. The right side of the wall. That's the city of David there. So somewhere like maybe towards the north side of the city of David, you go underneath the ground and you spit up.
It's kind of crazy that we're seeing the life sizes like the same.
Yeah.
Like how we saw that fortress earlier on the trip, but this one has a lot more meaning. I feel like,
Absolutely.
especially because apparently the stairs are intact almost. They're the oldest part, and they're somehow the only thing that lives on memory fully. At least everything.
And this was all the rich places.
Yeah.
Now, here's one of the examples that Aviona, he uses tradition and a little bit of imagination. There's a big cone-shaped building over here. That's a tomb. So that would be David's tomb on what we call today Mount Zion. That would be David's tomb. So he knows how fancy tombs would have looked in the Second Temple period, and that's what leads him to build David's tomb in such a way. The house on the left, if you're looking at me at my 12 o'clock, so on the left side of the David's tomb, that would be the upper room. The upper room. That would be the place where Jesus would have his final dinner, Passover meal, and he would say to the disciples, "This is my blood of the new covenant." Now, when he gives them the cup. Now behind that, you see those mansions, those big villas. One of those houses, either the one on the left or the one straight behind it, would have been Caiaphas' house, the high priest's house. So we'll visit these sites as well. Today, this area here, it has a modern name, and it's called Mount Zion. But when Josephus refers to this area, it's called the Western Hills. So over here in Hills, this great structure right here that I'm standing in front of, this would have been Herod's private house in the city of Jerusalem. It's a little frustrating that not a lot is left from it, but I think more and more archaeologists are able to confirm that indeed there was a palace that still today. It's been Miriam's beloved wife happened. This is it. So if it's, this is the tomb or that is the tomb, I don't know, but I take advantage of it of reading the gospel.
Amen.
So anyhow, this is how it is. So this would be Zion Gate. Now, here we are. This is the Western Wall. Brother Matt, where are you? The Western Wall is right here. As you can see, there's a bridge. It's hard to notice the bridge that leads up, one of the bridge leading up into the east side of the Temple Mount. But if you look right between this tower, Miriam's tower, and between Fetzal and Hippocampus, and if you look at the western supporting wall, you will see a little mark, a red mark showing this is it. And that shows you the Western Wall Plaza today. You got to stand right here to see it. It's right over there. That's the Western Wall today. That little bottom piece, that little insignificant little piece of rock is all that's left of this huge temple. There's a little red arrow showing you. Okay, over here, this is what we call today Jaffa Gate. Jaffa Gate leads to a street. Our hotel's on that street. It's called Jaffa. And you take that street all the way to the west. That leads you to a city called, what's the name of that city, Raymond? What's the name of that? Jaffa! Thank you very much. There it is.
Jaffa Gate.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, now.
And there's an aroma right there too.
Okay, now this wall here, I want you to notice this wall. Again, this model describes Jerusalem at its highest, right before the Romans come. So this wall here did not exist. You got to get rid of this wall. Ignore this wall, because this wall was built later by Herod Agrippa. You guys hear that? That's very important. Why? Because that leaves all of this outside of the city walls. Why is that important? Because if you look over there, you'll see the Hasmonean wall, and you see it makes kind of a 90-degree turn, and then it comes back into Miriam's tower, let's say, or Hippocampus. You know what I'm talking about? And you see a slab of rock, an empty slab of rock. That was a quarry right next to that gate. Everybody sees what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That was a quarry. And we do have evidence. I hope I'll be able to show it to you that quarry was used as a burial ground. That is where the Catholic and Orthodox world recognize Golgotha. That is where the Holy Sepulchre Church is, right over there. But to be politically correct, we'll also show you the Garden Tomb, and we'll go to both places, God willing.
So what's this tower here on the corner?
So this is it was a famous tower, famous in its height, and it was, of course, used for the defense of Jerusalem. It was built by, it had a gate. Yeah, there was a gate here in the city. The tower, it was built by Herod Agrippa, a very big, huge tower that would defend Jerusalem from the north. This is considered to be the third wall. I'm sorry I don't have enough information about it, but it was known to be existed in one of the defenses. Okay, brothers and sisters. Over here you would have a gate called the Damascus Gate. Damascus Gate would have been right over there. And then over here you see another piece of rock. It's very interesting because in my childhood I remember going on the rampart wall. I remember walking on the modern walls of Jerusalem and looking towards the east, and you had the skeleton look at you, because this rock, whoa, it looked just like a skeleton. It had these two eyes and nose sockets. By the way, Golgotha means the place of the skull, and believe it or not, they found a tomb there as well. So that is where most of the Protestant world believes is Golgotha. It's called the Garden Tomb, and it does have a skull-shaped rock and a tomb. Now, I know the truth, brothers and sisters, regarding the Holy Sepulchre and the Garden Tomb. I know the truth, David. Both sides show an empty tomb. There you go. Okay, now we're gonna see the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Hey, Yoni.
People, all they had to do was come to the Siloam pool. They didn't. They actually forgot that there was a Gihon spring, and they actually called it, for years it was called the Siloam spring. But it was actually the Gihon spring, and Siloam is Shiloach is sent. Hezekiah sent the water to the pool. So I'm guessing it was somewhere around those two buildings.
So the water would have come out like over here.
Okay, so the spring itself, let's take a, we're gonna go over all of that when we go to the city of David. But the Gihon spring itself would have came. The Gihon spring itself would have been somewhere over here. This is where the spring comes out. But later on, so many projects were built. The first project led a tunnel down to the spring, and they covered up the spring from the outside, and they'd go into the spring from inside. It was a typical Canaanite water system. You saw one with your own eyes in Megiddo, and it was something similar to that. But later on, they led the water to a pool inside. And then you would go into a certain point, and then you would exit the walls, and then you'd have some kind of walls protecting you. It's a waste of time talking about it here because you can't see what I'm talking about. But finally, when Hezekiah builds that tunnel, he just diverts the water all the way into the city. So we'll see that with our own eyes. It'll be more, it's complicated enough trying to understand it when you see it. So, well, I'll show it to you.
Thank you.
Look at these trees. I'm up here on the rooftop of the Shrine of the Book Museum at the Israel Museum. This is the roof. I wanted this shot
That's a good
too.
shot.
Yeah.
Cuando vamos a hacer mañana nosotros Jerusalén, vamos a estar en el Monte de los Olivos. El Monte de los Olivos es donde estamos parados nosotros. Así vas a hacer. Así hacía la ciudad.
Y tengo una pregunta. ¿Por qué hay como una ciudad amurallada dentro de la otra muralla?
La ciudad murallada, la que tenía que proteger completamente la ciudad. Y ojo, lo que empezaron a hacer muralla alrededor de la ciudad antigua, fueron los primeros. Jerusalén fue 49 veces, destruida, reconstruida 17 veces. Entonces puedes imaginar de lo que estoy hablando. Entonces, cada uno agrandaba la muralla a su poder, a su fuerza. La
Some of the containers are in here, and then the writings and what have you in the next room, and the shrine of the book. I really have to show you Isaiah, because I have to show you what they found between Isaiah 52 and Isaiah 54, so you can actually see it with your own eyes. I know exactly where it's at.
It's in there.
Like you said, the flip, over here they do not allow pictures to be taken, but somehow you can go to my
We're going into the Shrine of the Book Museum.